Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily for Wednesday, January 22nd. I'm your host for today, Riley Fessler, joined by Minna Stein. How are you, Minna?
I think I'm doing better today than I was yesterday. How are you doing?
I'd say about the same. I'm settled into our new reality. I'm ready to accept our new overlords. So
I will say every time I have to read President Trump instead of President-elect Trump, it does snap me back to reality a bit in a way that unsettles me.
No, that's fair. I see what you mean. When it was president-elect, it was like a far-off thing. And now
Right.
I'm back in 2016, or I suppose 2017 brain. And like, yep, all right.
Dark place to be.
Well, speak of the man himself. President Donald Trump reiterated plans to impose tariffs on the European Union, China, Canada, and Mexico, citing trade imbalances and the trafficking of fentanyl as key concerns. Trump discussed a potential 10% tariff on Chinese imports and a February 1st deadline for implementing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, linking these measures to efforts to combat illegal immigration and drug trafficking. While financial markets briefly rallied due to a perceived moderation in his approach, Trump signed a memorandum directing federal agencies to review trade issues, including trade deficits, currency manipulation, and illicit imports. Mexico and Canada adopted measured responses, emphasizing sovereignty and the stability of their trade agreements with the U.S. I fail to see how this brings down the price of eggs.
I also do, because if we tax them, they're going to tax us. So I don't see what it helps.
Well, I mean, even the tariffs by themselves will still raise prices for consumers. And then, yeah, they're not going to just accept 25% tariffs lying down. They're going to then implement tariffs on us, which will obviously raise prices even more. So, you know.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't study economics in college, but if prices just crash, isn't that a sign of a really bad economy? Like, isn't inflation normal, and don't you want wages to rise with the inflation of products? Doesn't that signify a good economy, not just prices dropping drastically out of nowhere due to skyrocketing tariffs on other countries?
I'm no economist, but yeah, I mean, like some amount of inflation is natural and just impossible to avoid. There's always a certain amount of inflation happening. It's just whether it's hyperinflation or just too high of inflation. But yeah, I mean, this is going to artificially raise prices dramatically beyond what was considered normal, which is rich considering that I think many assume that one of the main reasons Trump won was the perceptions of the Biden economy and inflation. Hence my dig at egg prices, because that was something we heard about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, nothing he's done at all addresses inflation or the economy. It's anti-DEI stuff, which we'll get to later. It's all this bullshit that doesn't actually help the issues that Americans say they care about, which, I mean, I think on this show, we knew that was the case because that's basically what Trump said. But it's still frustrating that people fell for that. And he's just making good on his promises to do exactly what he said, which is not, quote unquote, fix the economy. Because as we kind of said, the economy was pretty strong under Biden. It was just the perception of it. And now that he's in office, we're going to see stuff like this that actually does the opposite. And I'm curious how they'll play the blame game on that when prices go up if these tariffs are implemented, which I sincerely hope that they're not.
Well, let's hope that we, as in Democrats, can do a better job messaging this issue than messaging the strength of the economy before the election.
I've got bad news for you, Minna.
No, don't say it.
The answer is probably not. The Democrats have not figured out how to effectively message all this time since Trump has emerged on the political scene.
I have to be hopeful about something, so just let me have it, please.
Right,
we're going to do a great job messaging. Speaking of Democrats, Democratic-led states and civil rights groups filed multiple lawsuits challenging President Donald Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship for children born in the U.S. to non-citizen parents. The lawsuits argue that Trump's order violates the U.S. Constitution, as it would deny over 150,000 children citizenship annually, stripping them of access to federal programs and future rights such as voting and lawful employment. This marks the first major legal battle of Trump's administration over his immigration policies, and I am sure it will not be the last. I was doing some research after seeing this story, and over Trump's business life, he's been involved in over 4,000 lawsuits, and he loses 93% of them. So let's hope that this one falls on the 93% of that.
That's the track record of a winner right there. I mean, I don't know. It's
the art of the deal.
But I can't imagine that this will stand because it does go against the Constitution. That's just not something that you can just do via executive order. Whether they lose this lawsuit and it's doesn't happen, and then they pursue it through legal means, they being the Trump administration, to implement this. Maybe. I can't imagine this is particularly popular. I don't see that many people crowing about birthright citizenship, because it, of course, doesn't just affect immigrants from Mexico or from South America. It affects all immigrants. So I don't know. I don't think this is a winning issue. Maybe. I don't spend as much time in right-wing circles, so maybe this is something they've been talking about, wanting to get rid of, but I don't see this having wide appeal or appeal to the, quote, middle voter. This seems extreme even for potentially some of the people that swung for Trump.
And it seems pretty overtly like racist and anti-immigrant. It's hard to wrap that in any, quasi strategery or anything. It's just like, okay.
That's not something you can frame as enforcing law and order, because
no.
The law is that's allowed. I think one of the strengths of the anti-immigration crowd is that they can couch it as a law and order of we want to enforce the laws and keep people from coming here illegally. But this
is just
legal.
Xenophobia.
Yeah, this is literally just natalist policy. This is nationalist, ethno-nationalist in particular. And also the fact that it doesn't actually benefit Americans to have this happen, because immigration strengthens the economy. So it's just a bad idea all around, but it's not at all surprising. Mm-hmm. Speaking of more bad ideas, President Donald Trump's administration has initiated a broad rollback of federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, including the termination of affirmative action in federal contracting. An executive order signed on Trump's first day mandates federal agencies to dismantle DEI offices, cancel related training, and eliminate roles promoting diversity, with federal workers placed on paid leave pending layoffs. The directive also revokes a landmark executive order from President Lyndon Johnson and calls for a government-wide review of grants and contracts for compliance with the new anti-DEI stance. Trump's actions aim to replace DEI efforts with merit-based policies, which he claims address what he perceives as discrimination. Critics warn that the sweeping changes could take years to implement and face resistance due to entrenched federal practices. I'll never understand how DEI became such a big thing that people actually give a shit about, other than that people are, bigoted. Because who cares? Who gives a shit? This idea that you're replacing it with merit-based policies, that already existed. Mm-hmm. No, there's no DEI effort that completely eclipses the idea of merit. It's people that deserve the job, but are also diverse. It's not that. I think the narrative is that there will be a perfectly qualified white man that will not get the job because there's a black woman that knows nothing about the position that gets it because of DEI, and that's just not how that works.
Well, there's also the inclusion aspect of it, where you're trying to make sure that people feel
Yeah.
like they, can be in a workplace and feel like they're not going to be othered or
Well, I mean, I think
subjugated to pressures because of who they are.
I
Now
think
that's gone too.
that's the subtext, is that I think they don't want these people to feel like they belong. They don't
Yeah.
want them in their spaces. It's
True.
they use the first thing as the reason, but the reality is they just don't want these people to feel safe. And I think that's really the heart of it. And it's disgusting because, I think I'm of the belief that diversity, equity, and inclusion strengthens everyone. The rising tide raises all ships. So, it's something that it's amazing how much of an issue it's become in recent years to the right wing, the MAGA right in particular. But we knew he was going to do this. It's not at all a surprise. So I'm curious if they are able to make these changes quickly, or if it will take the years that some critics are saying it might.
Let's hope. A rare and historic winter storm is sweeping through the Gulf Coast and southern United States, bringing blizzard warnings, heavy snow, and dangerously cold temperatures to regions unaccustomed to such weather. Cities like New Orleans, Houston, and Jacksonville are experiencing record snowfall, with millions of people under warnings, widespread flight cancellations, and hazardous road conditions. The storm, which could cause power outages due to the freezing rain, is being called one of the most significant winter events in the region's history. One of the counties that was affected by it is Leon County, which is where Florida State University is, in Tallahassee, and they got snow. And I remember when I went to college, before I went to college, I had heard that in semi-recent history, it had snowed in Tallahassee one time, and it was just a dusting. Like, they barely got anything. But I was so excited because I thought, oh my gosh, maybe that's north enough that I'll get to see snow. And it's crazy to me now that they got absolutely hammered with snow. Obviously, it's relative, but comparatively, I was thinking about a cousin of mine who's very little and lives in Texas, and it's snowing there. And it's just sad to me that these Gen Alpha kids won't know anything different. I'm sad that they won't, they'll just know like extreme weather and not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. They won't get to dream of maybe possibly seeing snow. They'll just get extreme highs and lows.
Yeah. It's a bad time for an administration that doesn't believe in climate change, because, we've talked about this on this show and our other shows before, but this is only going to get worse as climate change continues and actually accelerates under the Trump administration. As we covered yesterday, we've pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord again. There's a massive political movement in the U.S. that wants to bury its head in the sand and say, nope, it's not happening, when the evidence is quite literally all around us and affecting red states just as much as blue states. It's not a partisan issue. Of course, there's wildfires in California, but, this is hammering southern states that are red. So it's not an issue of blue and red. It affects everyone. But, one of our major political parties doesn't seem to care. Well, rounding things out with Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, who faces allegations of alcohol abuse and misconduct from his former sister-in-law, Danielle Dietrich Hegseth, in a sworn affidavit submitted to the Senate Armed Services Committee. Danielle alleged witnessing erratic behavior and cited claims from Pete's ex-wife, Samantha Hegseth, about fearing for her safety during their marriage, though Samantha has publicly denied any abuse. Pete Hegseth has also faced past allegations of sexual misconduct, which he denied and settled without criminal charges. Despite the controversy, including criticism from Senator Jack Reed about the inadequacy of Hegseth's background checks, his nomination has moved forward in the Senate, bolstered by Trump and his allies. even if this isn't true, you have to kind of apply the when there's smoke, there's fire to Pete Hegseth. Even if half these claims are not true about him, the other half is still more than enough to disqualify him from this position in a polite society, which, of course, this is not. So he might just go on and get it regardless, even though
He will.
You can close your eyes and throw a dart and land on something that should disqualify Pete Hegseth because it's just a mountain of things.
Abuse is not disqualifying for this administration.
Apparently not. Well, yeah, apparently not. Apparently the fact that he, first of all, just isn't qualified regardless.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying that, there are quite a few abusers, the president being one of them. So
yeah, it's true. So pick your poison on why he shouldn't be in there. But I'm not sure he will. There's still a chance. You have to think that some of his cabinet picks are still not going to go through. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is still the one that a lot of people, myself included, speculate probably won't go through.
Let's hope.
But I don't know. Unfortunately, RFK Jr. will probably go through, which means that if there is a pandemic over the next 4 years, we are basically screwed. Because this is a guy that was trying to, as we know now, pull COVID vaccines or get COVID vaccines pulled in the heart of the pandemic. So it's a death cult. But, we're unfortunately now all part of it. So congratulations, Minna.
Ending on a good note.
Yeah. We can tell I'm very positive today on Wednesday, January 22nd. But,
it's hard to stay positive.
It really is. But, for the important coverage, even if it's not so positive, stay tuned right here to the DSR Daily. We'll be back for the rest of the week. We've also got the DSR podcast coming out later today with our regulars. So stay tuned for that. And we've got more across all our feeds for the rest of the week. So stay tuned. And until then, bye-bye.